nook and cranny. We spent the summer looking at that scope of work. Like I said, the next time frame was August and September, and we brought in more stakeholders from the community. And then there was a 45-day requirement from the time the board approves the referendum to the vote. The vote is December 15th. I know it seems like a weird time with the pandemic, but Jane will explain the time frame. But it's really important. It's a unique situation for the district to be able to get $22 million worth of work done and not have to change our tax levy or tax neutral. We're also doing this in conjunction with an EPC, an energy performance contract. We brought in Honeywell last spring. We're going to get about $2 to $3 million worth of work done. An energy performance contract is a scope of work that has to pay for itself. So what we save in energy is the cost of the project. So we're going to do those two performances in conjunction with each other. So there will be two referendums on the vote. That'll be explained a little bit more later on. One of the vote is to approve the $22 million. The other is to approve the district to get another 10% state aid on the energy performance contract. If you can go to the next slide. Okay. This talks a little bit about the infrastructure. Like I said, the previous building conduction survey was done in 2015. We prioritized our needs, 1s and 2s and 3s. If you look at the bottom, that was the previous scope of work was $24 million. And that debt service is about to come off. And that's why this is such a unique opportunity for us to do another capital project. If you look at the scope of work, and if you look at the photos as we go through this, there's nothing glorious with this. This is a blue collar, nuts and bolts. This is work that has to be done, needs to be done. And if it's being done under a capital project, as Jane is going to explain, we get aid back on that. This is work we have to do on our own in the future. Obviously, the cost of escalation will be more, and we may not get the aid back. So as far as for the taxpayers, it could actually cost us more. So with that, we can go to slide 4. Jane will talk a little bit about the debt service and how this will be paid for.
Okay, let's see, our last projects from 2005, 2006 was the last thing any major project was done in the district. And the debt associated with that, we're just about done paying for it. In June of 2022, we'll be finished paying that off. And the local capital share of that project currently costs about $800,000 a year in our tax levy. So the local capital share is the difference between the debt that we use to finance the project, so that's the principal and interest payments, and the state building aid that we're still receiving for that project. So both the debt service and the state building aid will be completed for that in June of 2022. So what we'd like to do is then start the financing on this project right after that, so that the local capital share will stay right around that $800,000 mark. So that's how we came up with the 22 million. So if we take the 22 million and the debt service related to that in the available state building aid, which is about 66%, it could go up to 67.5%. And then we also incorporate what the district has saved in its capital reserve of about $400,000. That will give us a continued local share of about $800,000, and which will keep our tax levy stable. And that's why we talk about a tax neutral project, because it'll keep it going at the same amount that we've been paying for each year within the tax levy. So as you can see with that graph, it continues about the same. So we won't have any spikes or drops within the tax levy. It will stay pretty consistent. And again, so as far as tax neutral, we take the state aid into consideration, and then we have that $400,000 we were able to save in the capital reserve, and that retiring debt that I talked about with the previous projects that we did gives us about $22 million a year, or about $22 million for this project, about $800,000 a year to pay for it. And that just goes over it again. So the retiring debt service, So we're going to replace the retiring debt service with about the same amount as we've been paying to keep the debt, the tax levy stable. And this is paid for over 15 years. So we'll receive the building aid amount, the total amount divided by 15 years. So we'll receive about the same amount each year, and the debt principal and interest payments will be about the same each year to get that net local share of the $800,000. And again, this is critical work that must get done, and the best way to finance this and to be eligible for the state building aid is to do it within a large project like this. Because if we wait until it's an emergency, then it can't always be incorporated into a project, and we would have to front the money, the entire amount right away. Whereas this project gives us the opportunity to pay for it over the useful life of what we're putting into our buildings.
Okay.
Hitting the unmute button here. Thanks, Jane. So I'll also ask that Randy Ricks and Mike DeLima can certainly jump in along this portion as well. Just want to share a visual tour of some of the scope of work for the project. This information is also available on the district website. So we're going to skim through some of this. You'll see some of the work is repetitive of nature as we go through it, but you can view the full complement of the scope, as well as a copy of this presentation will also be uploaded to the district's website. So really we established a goal early on for what are we trying to achieve as part of the capital project. And really the goal is to preserve the district's infrastructure for student and community use, and doing so within its means. So first of all, let's look at a couple of things that are happening. We call it district-wide, which means it's happening at all the school buildings. So one of the things you're seeing here is looking at reconfiguration of the main entrances at each of the schools, so that there's a added layer of security when visitors enter the building, and it allows for greater safety and security screening of people before they can pass into the rest of the building. Another thing that's happening on a larger scale across multiple buildings is some of the knob hardware that you can see. It's replacing it with ADA compliant, handicap compliant levers instead of the twist knobs. Also looking at replacing certain ceilings throughout the district that some of it's dictated by some of the other work that's going on in the area, be it mechanical, electrical, or plumbing. Some of it is, as you can see here, just ceilings that are in rough shape that need some attention. There's also, we're looking at some HVAC system upgrades as well to various buildings to help improve air quality of the student environments and to help reduce maintenance costs. That's not something that's easy to photograph, so that's something that's also happening. We just wanted to note. So if you look at each building a little bit more, I'll point this out here. You're going to see that there's a lot of paving infrastructure for paving that's included in the project scope of work. As you can see from this photo, there's just a lot of paving that's reached the end of its useful life. There's a lot of cracks, heaving, other drainage issues, as you can also see in this other photo. So a big part of this is looking at reconstructing what that asphalt needs to be and replacing it with a new subbase in many instances as well. And sometimes there's underlying drainage issues that also contribute to some of the areas in question. So where that happens, for instance, here at the bus loop, it's looking at making some improvements to that subsurface drainage so that you preserve the new asphalt. And similarly, there's a lot of other miscellaneous sidewalk repairs, if you will. Actually, it's infilling some of the joints that you can see here that open up, and if you don't preserve them, will heave and create tripping hazards. Looking at some ball stopper netting at the track, looking at resurfacing it. The surface that's there has reached the end of its useful life and needs to be replaced. One larger item at the junior senior high school, as you can see in these couple of photos, is that stucco-like material that's on the outside of the building. A lot of it has reached beyond the end of its expected service life. There's a lot of cracks, other deterioration, as well as issues at and around windows. So we're looking at, as part of this project, is replacing where you see that in like the 100s, 200, 300 wing, replacing that material, as well as the windows, and in many cases the wall material, the backup behind it, that's currently just kind of rotting with all the water penetration that happens.
And Jim, maybe I could chime in. When we talked about, Kirk did, about this being a blue collar project, the picture on the right of the window, I remember standing in front of that window and looking down into the cavity of the wall. You could actually see into the, not say into the room, but into the wall cavity, the studs, the MEPs. So these are essential items that need to be addressed, and that's the purpose of us, trying to scope this out and put together some visuals so everyone can get a feel of the work that's involved on the referendum that's being asked to vote upon.
These walls were put up in like 83, 84. Anybody that went to school before that remembers the two pieces of tin with the frost that used to accumulate when it was cold outside on the inside of the buildings in the 70s and the 80s.
There's a number of other items. We'll go through them a little bit quicker here, but addressing some of the drainage off door canopies, so it's not dumping on sidewalks in front of doors. Similarly, making sure that water has a path off the roof that's not spraying all over the side of the building that creates other issues. Inside, looking at the home economics area, that's had some updates over time, mainly to ceilings and floors, but now it's time to make sure it's an environment that's up to speed with the current curriculum needs. Similarly, entrance into some of the home economic spaces doesn't meet handicap accessibility requirements, so it's making some adjustments to make sure everybody is able to get there, all inclusive. At the senior high school gymnasium, looking at a number of upgrades, including, as you're going to see here, bleacher replacement, making sure they're modern powered units that you can get replacement parts for, that also have all the latest safety systems. Looking at the operable gymnasium wall in that same space, that's integral to the curriculum that's used here. And in this location, looking at how we can make sure that it's functioning properly. And then replacing some of the backboards and backstops with new powered units as well. And again, you're going to see some more door work, hardware work related to certain doors to improve security and make sure that we have an all-inclusive environment from an ADA perspective. At the stairs over at the middle school, making sure that the stair guardrails comply with current building code. This picture is really related to just showing what adding some generators at this particular site can benefit. So you're seeing the inside of a freezer cooler here. The idea is that adding emergency generators here, and why you'd have to add 2 is because the junior high and the senior high are fed differently from an electrical perspective. But the idea is to help preserve the infrastructure by running certain lighting, computer equipment, servers, the coolers, freezers, boilers, pumps, things like that, to ensure that school can still happen, to protect the building, quite frankly, if there's a long-term outage, and not suffer lots of other potential issues with frozen pipes or loss of food product. I think one of the important things to really point out at the junior senior high school is also looking at the auditorium spaces, making some upgrades here, replacing seating that's definitely seen better days, looking at the flooring in here, as well as looking at some of the other accoutrements that help with the functionality of that space, such as the AV booth, integrating that so it can help perform better. And then looking at the stage, as you see on the left, installing some lights that actually have been purchased before. They just need to be installed, as well as some of the lighting controls. And as you see on the right, making sure that some of those other supporting elements, like the AV booth, that those are functioning with the rest of the space. There's also some electrical equipment that's really past the end of its expected service life, such as the transformer you see here, looking at some improvements to the electrical system to make sure that you can get parts and they'll go on to serve well. Some of the sewer pumps need to be replaced, and the pump feeds. Again, parts are an ongoing issue for a number of these systems that you're seeing. Installation of a paint booth that was purchased for the technology classroom. There has to be some other connections to make this functional, and vented up through the roof, which requires some abatement as well because of the tar paper that happens to be in this area of the roof. But once installed, it certainly will add to the ability of that curriculum to do other items. Looking around the junior senior high school, there's a number of these roof edges. You can see some of it's missing here. They need to actually be abated because of the material that's here. So looking at replacing those mostly on the junior high school side, as you're seeing here in this photo.
Some people look at that picture and say, why would why you guys can't fix that? Well, it's a transite material that has asbestos type in it, and it's once it falls down or comes apart like that, we're not legally allowed to touch it unless we have a licenses to do that.
Yeah, good point, Randy. Thank you. Moving to Cahill. So again, some exterior work. Here you're seeing one of the gates, making sure that it has the correct hardware. And so we would be looking at replacing some of that so that you can exit properly from the playground. Here you're seeing I can point to them here. You're seeing these 4 tall things. These are masonry stacks that are from the original building that work with the HVAC system. The masonry that makes up those shafts needs to be reconstructed in part to ensure water tightness. Also at Cahill, again, this is another large one that really will affect a larger portion of the building, is a lot of the flooring and the subflooring, which is below the finished flooring, has issues and is in need of replacement. So that's a more widespread item that's through corridors and many classrooms and offices as well.
There was a question brought up on the Facebook post about the project. Why is this being done? Because that was done in the last project. And unfortunately, the subfloor was not put down correctly, or the proper subfloor wasn't used, and that's what's causing this cracking.
Yeah, so any of that that issue transfers up through the finished floor, and if left, as you can see, there's missing tiles. It just creates the potential for larger tripping hazards. Also at Cahill, looking at, as you can see from this cover piece here below the window, that there's heating element in there. It may not run the full length in many cases of that enclosure, and trying to provide more heat into these spaces is important. Looking at some handrails for ADA accessibility at the gym. Another big one at Cahill is looking at replacement of many of the windows that are in need of, they have issues with failure in various ways, and they're thermally inefficient. So really looking at replacing those with modern units. If we look at Morris, again, like I said, there's going to be more site work here. It's adding paved walkway from the building back to the parking lot for student access and safety. At the playgrounds, again, more pavement that needs to be attended to. Similarly here along the walkway, along Harry Wells Road towards Buffalo Road. And again, more paving. Also at Morris, similar to what I had just mentioned for Cahill, you can see the deterioration on the top of the chimney and the cap here, looking at reconstructing some of that masonry. Morris, the slide and the next slide actually go hand in hand. So at the gymnasium, adding some improvements to the HVAC system so that you have a more comfortable environment, especially once you're able to hold larger events in there again. And this photo isn't so much for this wall as it is the possibilities of what could be behind it, looking at adding a small, a relatively small addition that could house a new platform or stage, if you will, for different school productions and events here, so that it helps provide equity amongst all the elementary schools in that regard. If we move to Mount Marion, you can also see here, again, pavement is a big theme here with a lot of deterioration. Some more of that as well around the backside. And also looking at Mount Marion, making sure that if you use handicap parking, that you have a clear path that you're able to get to the building. So that may involve adding some ramp curbs in the sidewalks, adding some signage, things like that. And again, just more deterioration for pavement that needs to be addressed. Mount Marion, this is a bigger one. What you're seeing here, the big gray piece here in the middle, this is the main electrical panel for the entire building that happens to reside in the boiler room. So outside of Randy and his crew, most people are never going to see this. At the other elementary schools, this piece of equipment was replaced in previous projects. However, at the time, this particular building's distribution panel happened to be in the best shape, so it remained. Now it's time to replace it. Tough to get parts at this point. Basically, they're obsolete, and really need to also raise this up off the floor so that in the boiler room, you know, when you get some water on the floor, it doesn't interact with the electricity. You'll see this in a few buildings as well, elementary schools, that is. Looking at what you're seeing here is the closed gym partition door, really looking at replacing those with an overhead curtain system. Unlike the senior high school, these are rarely used, and in fact, they're tough for upkeep on the district's part and the certification with the safety systems for something that's pretty rarely used. If we move over to Riccardi, again, like I said, you'll see the pavement becoming a theme. So more pavement here. Also at Riccardi, looking at a similar thing with Mount Marion, with adding some handicap spaces that are closer to the main entrance, some signage, and providing a suitable route from those spaces to the building. Again, more pavement. And inside, looking at some of these doors that you're seeing that happen to be in the hallways, tying those into the fire alarm system so they automatically close if the fire alarm is triggered. Helps with smoke containment. Also at Riccardi, like we just talked about, similar thing with the gymnasium door, replacing it with a curtain. If we go over to Hildebrandt, if you look here at the ramps, you're seeing handrails that have deteriorated, a little harder to see on the left, but there's about an inch or so drop, so that technically the ramp itself is not truly handicap accessible. And then there's just cracking and other deterioration that's happening that needs to be addressed. Also at Hildebrandt, looking to replace the original roof that's up there that's certainly exceeded its life expectancy. There's some active leaks that are up there that I know Randy and his crew put the Band-Aids on there, and now it's really time to look at the larger replacement. A couple of slides here I'm not going to get into. Again, this is there's other scope that's happening. This information's available on the district website, but I would encourage you, if you have some time to look at it, you can find that information there. So as Superintendent Reinhardt mentioned earlier, we certainly were trying to make an all-inclusive process as we were going through and reviewing the facilities with BBL and the district. And as part of that, we had several different type of community engagement and other type of participation meetings. As you can see here, we met several times. It was great. There was a lot of interaction and great feedback, things that sometimes you just didn't think about that other people can lend a different perspective on. So, my mighty dachshund in the background, sorry about that. So part of what came out of that were a couple of scope refinements, I'll call them, a few things that were less of a priority that could come out. There was actually very few, but the bigger thing was a few important things that were recommended to be added in. So what you're seeing here is at the junior senior high school, and specifically the senior high school, is looking at some of the current state of affairs there. So on the left, you can see a lot of those larger lockers are in pretty rough shape. And then on the right, you're seeing the showers that, if they even get used, are open to everybody. And certainly at the moment, that's not the way that really promotes their use. And that was one of the motivating factors with looking at the senior high school locker room, was trying to get ahead of the curve from the state. It was felt that there's going to be some changes in the pike that will be mandated from the state, and it was really trying to include upgrades to the senior high school locker rooms that could take advantage of budgeting it as part of a capital project. Similarly, it was looking at the weight room at the junior senior high school. There's some issues with the subfloor in here, so it's replacing the floor and the subfloor, or the floor beneath what you see on top. The other item that really came out of those committee meetings is at Cahill looking to replace, in this photo where you see the white areas of roof, they're at the end of their useful life. And we'll also investigate whether the shingled areas, those gray sloped areas, are also in need of replacement. So that'll be added to the scope as well. So what does all that look like? Again, at the very bottom, if you look here, you'll see the project total, excuse me, the referendum amount of the $22,390,000. That's made up of the actual work by each building. There's escalation in there as well as an abatement allowance. We know that we're working with older buildings. There's things that we're going to come across that we need to allow for some monies to deal with that we can't see at this point. That's also handled through some of the contingency items. And then there's the incidental expenses at the bottom that are required for things like architect's fees, CM fees, legal costs, so on and so forth. And all of that is what totals the $22,390,000.
Jim, can I jump in here? So
Absolutely.
how do we get to that? I think you mentioned it at the onset of your presentation, is that our teams went with Randy. We walked through every building. We looked above the ceilings. We looked behind the doors, per se. We took into account items like, did pipes have to get abated with insulation that needed to be removed and new insulation put in? We tried to, turn every stone that we could. Look at the roof areas, besides the site work, the obvious things. We tried to look behind the curtain. And the reason for that is we want to identify all the scope items that make up the $22 million. And then we put real numbers to it based on where the market was and where the market we believe is going to head. And that's how we came up with these totals. There's a lot that goes behind that, and there's checks and balances that our teams went back and forth on, that we feel real comfortable that the 22 million does account for all the scope items identified, and allows us to successfully design the project and go up to bid. Because ultimately state ed has these buckets of funds where these funds need to go specifically to this project. They can't go fund a different program, and you can't exceed those funds. So, we dot the I's, cross the T's multiple times to get to this level here. And then we take it to a new step once we actually get to draw and design and pick systems. Again, tons of checks and balances to ensure that we're protecting the district's dollars and we're getting a quality product once construction can start.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And that's a good segue here to the project timeline. So what are we looking at? As you can see, the big vertical line in red is really where we are today. And the vote, as we've talked about, is December 15th. What happens after that? So really, we still need to go through a design process, as Mike was just mentioning. That's where we'll actually design things. Mike and his team will price it. We'll have the checks and balances, as he said. We'll work with the district. And then in New York State, schools get their building permits issued by SED, or the State Education Department. They'll have to review the project before we can go out to bid. So in about a year from now, probably a little bit more than that, but about a year from now, in early 2022, looking to go out to bid, and then in the summer of 2022 and 2023, right now looking at about a 2-year construction phase for the project. And as Superintendent Reinhardt mentioned at the beginning, there's another proposition on the ballot for December 15th. So Proposition 2 is for an energy performance contract, or an EPC project. Again, some of this was already mentioned, but through an RFP process, Honeywell was selected as the energy services company to deliver that contract. And what happens again is that the energy savings generated by the scope of work that you can see in that table on the right pays for the project. and it has to pay for itself using simple payback in no more than 18 years. It's a project that, if the voters approve, it provides an additional enhanced state building aid, which, as you can see on here, is estimated to be worth about $375,000 over 15 years. But to take advantage of that additional enhanced state building aid, that has to be approved by the voters. Kind of sounds a little silly to have to ask the voters to approve getting more aid for something, but that's just the way SED works. Some of the scope for this project, really the first one is the most prevalent, widespread one that will benefit the most people, which is replacing existing lighting throughout the buildings with new LED lighting and controls that'll provide much more uniform and better lighting in all of those environments, especially for the students. Looking at a boiler plant upgrade at Riccardi. Building management is the controls software and system that's used to create, to control the HVAC system. Looking at some building envelope improvements, pipe insulation, and some different controls related items to how electrical usage is calculated, or how it's used, I should say. So again, to share a little bit of referendum information, again, capital project votes on Tuesday, December 15th from 12 to 9 at all 4 of your local elementary schools. The 2 propositions are, the first one is for the capital project, which is really what we've been talking about for the most part here. That's to authorize, if it's approved, the $22,390 tax neutral infrastructure preservation project. And then the second proposition that you'll see on there is for the energy performance contract that I had just talked a little bit about. That's for the authorization of the additional 10% state building aid. There's been a few questions about some of the voting. I don't know if Holly, if there's anything here in particular you'd want to highlight, but I guess I'd just like to point out that the voting for a capital project is different than what we just went through with the general election. They're held to different requirements.
If I could just chime in on a couple of protocols we're putting in place, like Jim was saying, we can't move the vote. I mean, this is the best time for the vote as far as the debt service and for us to make this tax neutral. This plan started about 18 months ago. And it's important that we stick and do the best we can for our taxpayers. So we have put in some protocols there. You can do an absentee ballot. It's on our website. If you qualify, you can reach out to Sherry. Also, things we're doing, Sherry and Randy and his crew have done an amazing job setting everything up. There will be social distancing. There will be signs. There will be hand sanitizers. There will be gloves. We will have people monitoring the capacity of the rooms. Things will be cleaned. Everything we need. We want to make sure that it's a safe voting environment for everybody. We also made sure that we have the voting set up at all 4 locations. We want to make sure that anybody who wants to vote has that opportunity. The voting will be from 12 to 9. There will not be students in the building. Somebody had asked me that. The elementary students will have a half a day. There will be separate entrances for the staff that will be doing professional development in the afternoon, and the community members that choose to come in and vote. The elementary principals have been amazing. Once again, they've worked with Randy and Sherry, our board clerk, to set everything up. We'll make sure all of that information is on the website. But once again, we've gone above the standards for making sure that this is a safe vote for anybody who comes out that day. Like I said, there'll be hand sanitizing stations, there'll be gloves, there'll be masks, there'll be social distancing, there'll be monitoring of the capacity of the voting locations, the floors will be marked. So we've taken everything into consideration to make sure we can make this happen for our students, for our staff, and for our community.
With that, if there's any other items that Holly or anybody else on the team needs to interject, otherwise I think we can open it up to any questions.
Yeah, great job, everyone. So at this time, we are going to open it up for questions. If you go over to your chat bar, you can put your questions in there. We do have a comment coming in from Mark H. He has several comments regarding the basis of evaluation, question of student numbers, and school closing. So Mark, if you could maybe give us some more details, and Superintendent Reinhardt, if you want to, we've spoken in some different meetings about, rumors of school closings, like that. If you want to go into that while Mark collects his additional thoughts, that would be
Sure.
great.
So I think Jim or Mike had alluded before, this money comes from a different location as far as funding. School closing, schools remain opening, that depends on enrollment and state aid. This bucket is allowable for capital projects. This is money that is kind of like a spend, and we get that portion. I'm sure Jane will correct me if I'm wrong. Regardless of where we are in the future, as far as enrollment, student capacity, as you saw, this is work that needs to be done in our buildings to maintain our buildings, regardless of how down the road these buildings will be purposed. So that's the reason why the priority list, the building condition survey, was done in 2015. We were very fortunate. I think BBL, Tetra Tech, and Randy's crew did an amazing job of prioritizing everything. We were able to get all of our 1s and 2s in the scope of work. And then with the help of our community stakeholders, we then rounded it off to the items like the auditorium, the roof at Cahill, looking more at HVAC, the locker rooms, items like that. So I feel fortunate that we were able to get through a lot of the priorities that, as you saw, need to be done. And has been said earlier, if it's not during this scope of work, a lot of this work still needs to be done, but that could come out of general fund. There could be higher escalation, and it could be work that may not be as aidable as it is right now.
Great, thank you. And just a reminder to everyone, a building condition survey is a very comprehensive report that goes into incredible detail about, the current conditions of our building, and it's mandated by New York State to be completed every 5 years. And the district, hires professionals with expertise to conduct those surveys. And it's really intended to be a strategic planning tool to help address facilities needs in the future, give you a roadmap to look at to the types of things that your building will need. So, it's a very, very comprehensive professional document.
Yeah, thank you. I can't say enough that, as me coming in here brand new, the background information that our maintenance and custodial staff had on that building condition survey really helped us drive us to really make sure we were getting everything that we needed to do and stay under that capital project amount to keep us at the exact same tax levy. So that was really, really helpful in going through this project.
Still waiting for some more questions to come in. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to ask? And while we're waiting,
Holly, if I could just
point everyone, if you do visit the website, there's a capital project section put up there that has a lot of information, including about a 7-minute video that just gives some highlights. It's a quick summary of this presentation that we've had today, but it might help answer some additional questions as well. Yes, Jim, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry about that. I was just going to point you to that exact same information. Thank you.
Okay. So follow up here from Mark. It is clear that this project was designed based on not giving any tax break to taxpayers. I know many of this needs to be done, but if we should be closing a school, we do not need to do many millions of dollars of upgrades before sale. Personally, the same tax levy claim is an insult to the taxpayer. Having to additionally use saved money is makes it even worse. People are out of work and under extreme stress right now.
Well, my goal as always was never to insult anybody. Our goal is to maintain our buildings I don't see us selling a building, but for a building that may be repurposed.
Yes, and Superintendent Reinhardt, at this point, there are no decisions to
No.
close a building. That's not
No, there's none.
intent.
No.
Maybe I could chime in, Holly, a little bit, at least on the dollars and cents and the timeline. We talk about the retiring debt, and it was a good time to be at tax neutral. But we try to outline that if certain aspects of this scope of work does not get completed, then it falls into a different category. And then the district would run the risk of having to do the work and not having the benefit of the aid that the state ed would present. Again, it goes back to buckets of money. With regards to timeline, the timing of this is important with regards to
Mike, you froze up on us.
all right, am I back?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so I don't know where I left off, but maybe I'll just pick up with the timeline. The timeline is important in the sense that with a successful referendum approval, you go through a design process. It lets us bid the project in a good bidding market in the winter of the following year, where contractors are looking for work, versus trying to bid it in an off-bidding cycle where contractors do have a big boatload of work lined up and then the prices are higher on things. So we've strategically tried to plan that into this as well, again, to preserve in the district's funds as much as possible.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Maskell is asking if she may say something.
Yes.
Hi there. Hey, Holly.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to break in because I wanted to echo what Kirk said, and I wanted to also point out to the person that made the comment that, so this is a tax neutral project, right? We're keeping the tax levy is going to stay the same, and we're not going to have any fluctuations. And the way that it was explained to me through the audit committee was that keeping that local share flat is actually much better to the taxpayers than having that local share drop off and then go back up. So the difficult part is when that local share drops off and people's taxes go down, then bringing those back up becomes much more problematic to the taxpayer. So we did keep all that in mind when we were doing that. Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Is that
You're right. You're
Okay.
right.
We did keep all that in mind when we were trying to come up with a number for this project. It was very important to the board and to the administrative team to make this a tax neutral project so that it wouldn't make people's taxes go up. That being said, there's really a lot of credit that needs to go to the staff that's at the district, because they have saved the district a lot of money by doing this work on their own. And so Randy and his crew have gone above and beyond helping getting work done for us that's really helped out a lot. So that's saved us a lot of money. And we are very cognizant of the fact that we don't want people's taxes to go up. And I just want everyone to make sure that they understand that we haven't gone into this project lightly, and we do have everyone's best interests at heart, which is why this tax neutral project is really going to be great for the district and also for the taxpayer.
Great, thank you. And if I'm not mistaken, Jane, you worked with a financial advisor
Yes.
who specializes in school funding to help put together this project to
Yes.
really look at the taxpayer.
Yep. They look at our financials. They usually use a pretty conservative interest rate estimates, and they do long-term projections, and they update it each year for the district. And I believe this district has worked with them a number of years, and I've worked with them personally with other districts and with counties. So yeah, they came up with the numbers and they double, triple check it. And again, we look at it each year.
So Mark is just adding, I totally understand the timing, debt reduction, and needs of the school district. It still shows of spending to meet tax dollars and not being fiscally responsible. So, does anyone else have any questions?
Mike, I know that you have often spoke about, other school districts are working on capital projects at this time as well, but some of them are not as in a good position as we are. Can you explain?
Yes, most school districts are continuing to do construction and bidding because of the necessity to replace outdated systems, roofs, parking lots, etc. My district where my kids go, we're in the midst of a project and there was a tax increase. Again, the uniqueness at Saudi is that we're able to do this work at a tax neutral level. Districts are doing projects, but they are not in the unique situation that Sargadees is with regards to the timing and the retirement depth to be able to do a project. I would say just look around. If you have family in other districts, maybe just ask. Again, the situation here is very unique. It's a great opportunity.
So we do have another question coming in, guys. It's from B. Burgeon. If approved, would local contractors within the district be given preferential consideration when bidding on individual projects?
Oh, bless you.
So maybe I could chime into that.
Yeah.
Jim had mentioned that since it's a state funded, there's certain requirements that the state needs to follow. The WICS law, a minimum number of bid packages. So it will be a local public bid process. What we do on our end is that being from the area and in the multi-years of doing school construction, we've garnered great relationships with the local contractors and suppliers. So as the job starts building up steam, while it's an SCD review, we're reaching out to the local contractors, the local suppliers of this drywall, the roofing. We're making them aware of the project. We get into specifics of the type of roofing systems, the type of electrical work going in, and when to be ready to, and when the work would take place. And then we go through a full court press of reaching out to all the subs, the tapers, the painters, the flooring contractors, besides the big contractors, the electrical and the plumbing. And we try and keep as much local involvement. Ultimately, everyone will be an open public bid based on the bid packages that are set up. It will be the low bidder, the low qualified bidder. It will be bonding requirements, insurance requirements. But we really do try and reinvest back into the community. We feel that it is a prideful community, Sargadees, and we want to keep that pride in there. It's like most districts. If you could keep it local, people feel invested, feel like they're part of it, and we try and spread the word as much as we can to make all the bidders very informed of the project and the parameters of it. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I said it. That answers the question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a response for Mark H's last comment. And I think this is what you're trying to get at, the saved funds within the capital reserve, spending that money to go towards this project. The capital reserve can only be used for capital projects, and that reserve was voted on by district voters, I believe in maybe 2017, 18. I'm not quite sure. It happened before I got here, but that's something that the voters voted to approve, to put those funds in there. And it was actually voted on it could go up to $10 million, I believe, the district could save to put in there, but we've only, it's only been around for a few years, so we only have about $400,000 in there. But again, it's under education law. and I believe it's under education law, and that we can only put, the voters have to vote for us to have the reserve and put money in it, and that reserve can only be used on a capital project, and we can't use it for any other purpose. If that was your question.
I know that in previous conversations too, and I don't know who wants to speak on this, but that if we had, like, let's just say we didn't do a tax in staying at a tax neutral level, that we actually decreased it. But if things came up and a lot of the things that are in this project need to be fixed on an emergency level, that would not be wise. I know that, you know, Randy stays on top of things. I don't know if Randy's still on, but to do things on an emergency sake would not be good.
Can we answer any other questions? Thanks. Will COVID considerations be made for absentee voting?
Once again, I think Jim had talked about the education law. COVID-19 itself cannot be a specific reason to request an absentee ballot. There are other situations that are listed on the website for an absentee ballot. That's also why we made it so important to make sure that we went above and beyond whatever standards were needed to make sure that anybody who chooses to vote can be done safely. Like I said, Randy and his crew already went out. They're going to mark the floor. There's going to be hand sanitizing station. They're going to monitor the amount of people inside. They're going to monitor the spacing outside. And we made sure that we kept all 4 voting locations open to reduce density. Like I said, the voting hours will be 12 to 9, which you also hope will spread out the voting.
Jim, can you just back the presentation up a slide so that it sits on that information? And if you just look up in the comments a little bit earlier, Christine shared the link to obtain the application for an absentee ballot. It's right on the website, so you can go there. You can download the application. If the requirements meet your needs, you can fill that out. And if you are going to request an absentee ballot be mailed to you, the district clerk must receive that application at least 7 days prior to the vote so that there's sufficient time to issue the absentee ballot and for it to arrive to you in the mail. And those ballots must be returned to the district clerk by 5 p.m. on December 15th. Any other questions anyone has tonight?
I'd just like to say, Holly, I think when we started this process in springtime, no one saw the COVID impact coming upon us, right? And we've had great input from stakeholders in the community. And even when we went through and we tried to define the scope of work, some of the input was really, I won't say driven by COVID. Can we look at HVAC upgrades? Can we look at things that to kind of present where the challenges are in front of us? And it was a great team effort. These WebEx meetings, Zoom meetings we've been doing, we're trying to be as transparent as possible. We're trying to share as much information. Our teams get so close to the information, we don't want to talk too much or talk too little, but we try and highlight the pictures of the things that are needed, try and explain the financial perspective, try and explain the design and construction perspective and how we involve everyone and how we always try and safeguard the funds. That is so important of even the little things of when you go bid to the prime contractors does make a huge difference on bid results. And if you get 2 electricians versus 5 electricians bidding, and that's all the pre-work that's done when we're going through a design and right before going out to bid, I think it's important. Again, we have a great team here and hopefully we've shared enough information for people to make an informed decision.
And Christine, could you put the email address in the chat bar? There is a very specific email address set up. If anyone does have any further questions, you can send it into there and we can connect you to whoever on the team would have that information. Again, it was, really important to Superintendent Reinhardt and the Board of Education that this information was available to anyone, and they've really done an outstanding job of making communications a priority between availing themselves to any community member who has questions, presentation after presentation after presentation. Everyone should have gotten a postcard in their mailbox 6 or 7 weeks ago, alerting them to the project, alerting them to this meeting, content on the website. So we really want to be able to answer any questions that you have. Please, feel free to send us an email.
First of all, I want to thank, I know Mark just said he appreciates the opportunity. I appreciate his feedback. I mean, that's why we do these. The community has the right to know why we're spending their money. It is their money. And one of the things I want to say is I've worked with Mike previously on a $137 million project, and he was tied to the hip to me. We knew where every dime went. And every time we said something, we said that's the taxpayers' money. And it is important. And people have the right to ask, why are we doing it now? Why are we spending this money? Why do we make these decisions? Because it is important. I mean, and we do know that it's a tough time. I'm on the phone most of the day with parents. We know that there's small communities. We know that a lot of the businesses are struggling right now, and we know that. And I feel very confident with the team and the stakeholders we had. We had community members, we had community business owners. Mr. Murphy was on this, Mr. Charvis was on it, and we really looked at everything. School district is one of the biggest investments that a community makes. And we know how important it is to maintain the structure, but we also understand what our community is going through with the COVID, with the employment, with the lack of jobs, with the changing of lockdowns and everything. So, I appreciate everybody who logs on and asks us questions. We have an obligation to be transparent and to explain why we're making our decisions. So I appreciate everybody who calls us or sends an email or sends a question. Christine has the email up there. We have an FAQ there. Please, any questions, anything that wasn't clear, please reach out to us, and somebody on the team will definitely get that answer out to everybody.
Yeah, I really appreciated everybody's input throughout the process and the opportunity tonight to share some information with everybody. And would just like to say again that this information, there's a great repository on the website that Christine and Holly have been tending to. So please look there. If you have any questions, use the email address and we will get back to you.
Great. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, I would just like to thank everyone for attending, and thank you to our presenters tonight. And have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Please be safe.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Night.